The other famous argument made, in a secular state, is there place for a Prime Minister in a temple? To talk about that and more, I'm joined by author Ashwini Sanghi. Very often when there's any such event, a lot of people wonder whether there should be a separation between the state and religion, whether that line is being blurred. More importantly, what is the need? What is the need for another temple when you need jobs? So let's talk about that and also the civilizational question of why such projects are needed. Joining us is author Ashwini Sanghi. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Let me start by asking you, sir. Of course, Mahakal Lok, the corridor has just been inaugurated. Do you think that this revamp is aimed towards some kind of grander project of a great Hindutva renaissance?
Well, Padmaja, the truth is that whether it is the Bhumi Pujan that happened at Ayodhya, whether it is the revamp of Kashi Vishwanath, or now whether it is the Mahakaleshwar corridor, these are all wonderful first steps in reconnecting us with our civilizational heritage. But honest to God, I must say to you tonight that Yeh Dil Maange More. I mean, our sad reality is that the Mahakaleshwar Temple's revenues as well as its lands are controlled by the state government by an act known as the Mahakaleshwar Mandir Act of 1982. So it is a government appointed committee and administrator who micromanage every aspect of the temple, including the pujaris, the donations, the land acquisition for public purposes, even the licenses for selling prasadam. In the last 12 months, the temple has had a revenue of around roughly 81 crores in the last 12 months. But that's about 22 lakhs a day. And this is one temple. There are 4 lakh such temples that are under various forms of government control. So yes, I am very, very proud of the Prime Minister for having done what he has done and for making such a humongous effort towards revitalizing these cultural heritage spots and these spiritual spots. But it is about time that the fundamental issue of freeing Hindu temples is taken up seriously, and that will be the real renaissance, Padmaja. I mean, prior to British rule, Hindu temples were administered and managed by local communities, which meant that the wealth could be actually utilized for civilizational and cultural purposes. It was used to promote art, culture, schools, cow shelters, rest houses, dispensaries, gaushalas, local charities. But then, of course, the British came along and then everything changed as a result of a 1925 law. You would have imagined that post-independence, this should have undergone a transformation. Instead, we had the first Tamil Nadu Act being passed in 1959, and thereafter a slew of South governments decided to take over temples. So as a result of which, Tamil Nadu today controls 44,000 temples. Andhra Pradesh controls 33,000 temples. In fact, 15 Indian states have acts that have legalized this religious discrimination, which gives power to state governments to be able to exercise control over the finances of 4 lakh places of worship. So while I heartily congratulate Pradhan Mantri ji for his efforts to energize and revitalize, I believe that the real renaissance is yet to come.
So if people argue that state and religion should be kept separate, they should also question why state gets to earn from people's faith and people's religion. Coming to that though, we heard it during the Ram Janmabhoomi, when the Bhumi Pujan happened, the Prime Minister went for it. Today when he is inaugurating the Mahakal corridor, that what business does the Prime Minister of a secular country have going to a mandir and be seen very prominently with a tripund, with chandan, with a tilak? He shouldn't have any of that.
Yeah. Well, think about this, Padmaja, that Modi ji in that sense is simply preserving not necessarily a religious ethos, but civilizational ethos. Think of this. Does the King of England, being the head of the Church of England, interfere with the secularism of the UK? Or does the American president holding the national prayer breakfast each year interfere with American secularism? Does the French government restoring the Notre Dame Cathedral after the fire interfere with France's secularism? If there is one country that is very proud of its secular credentials, it's probably France. In fact, there's an article within German basic law that gives religious education an important role in civic education in Germany. Does that affect its secularism? So there will always be those who decry the Prime Minister's actions, the ones who say that this violates secularism. But honestly, let's ask ourselves the question, what does the term secular mean? Strictly, it means that there should be separation in totality of church and state. In a secular nation, the government must stay away from anything religious. But India fails entirely if that is the definition. For example, how could a government have codified and modified Hindu personal law in the 1950s if we were secular? How could India recognize Sharia-based Muslim personal law? How could state governments take over management of Hindu temples? Pursuant to the Shah Bano case, how was the Muslim Women's Protection of Rights Act of 1986 passed? How are subsidies extended under the Hajj Committee Act? How are special provisions under the Waqf Act of 1995 passed? So these and many more such actions would clearly fall outside the remit of a secular nation. And that is why the writers of the preamble realized that it was better not to use the term secular rather than to use it dishonestly. The word secular was only inserted by a lame duck parliament in the emergency years. You and I both know that. But did the insertion of secular in 1975-76 imply that India had not been secular prior to 1975-76? Had the omission of the word turned India into a Hindu Rashtra? Not at all. By leaving the word out of the preamble, the fathers of our constitution were making it incumbent on Hindus to remember their commitment to the Upanishadic ideal of Vasudeva Kutumbakam. That the world is one family. The framers of the constitution were subtly saying that the Indian ethos is essentially Hindu in character, but that the ethos implied an ingrained respect and tolerance of all faiths. India is secular today because of its Hindu ethos, its civilization. What happens to all of this when you go to the 49 Muslim majority countries around the world? The only way to preserve secularism in India is by maintaining that Hindu syncretism. We are proud of our Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb of India. For every Bhimsen Joshi, we have a Zakir Hussain. For every Vikram Sarabhai, we have an Abdul Kalam. But then ask yourself, why is that Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb not maintained in Bangladesh or Pakistan? Look at Indonesia or Malaysia. These are countries which are mostly Islamic in terms of faith, but yet they have preserved their pride in terms of their Hindu roots. So why is it not possible for us to do that? And I think that is pretty much what the Prime Minister seems to be doing.
Because, you know, in a way, if you see in popular culture or in the way that a lot of visualization that happens now, Hinduism and Hindutva has become almost synonymous. People say that Hindutva is more of a militant ideology. So when you see, you know, a Mahakal with a Trishul and a Prime Minister with a Tripund, suddenly there is this fear, there is a paranoia that this is a country where I am not going to be safe if I am not a Hindu.
Yeah. But think about this, honestly speaking. I mean, the Hinduism, or what we can consider civilization or the ethos emanating from what we consider to be Sanatan Dharma, is one of the very few pre-Bronze Age civilizations to have survived to this day. I mean, do you see Zoroastrianism thriving in Iran? What happened to the Mithraic cults of Rome? What happened to Ra, Osiris, and Horus of the Egyptians? What happened to Zeus or Apollo and Athena of the Greeks? What happened to the tribal belief systems and languages of the Aboriginal peoples of Australia? Most pagan belief systems could not withstand the onslaught of Abrahamic thought. But Hinduism survived against all odds. And that's why I believe that the PM is right to be able to preserve and nurture it. I mean, think about this. The very temple that we are talking about, the Mahakaleshwar Mandir, was destroyed by Iltutmish of the Delhi Sultanate in 1235. In fact, it was rebuilt in 1734 by the Maratha general Ranoji Shinde. And this is not the only wound to Hindu civilization. What Nepal calls the wounded civilization, this is not the only wound. The attacks on Somnath, the burning of Nalanda, the destruction of Ram Janmabhoomi, the destruction of Kashi Vishwanath and Mathura, I mean, according to Sitaram Goel, the number of temples destroyed or desecrated was around 40,000. And to think that all of this cruelty was perpetuated on a population that prided itself on providing sanctuary to others. That is why this entire bogey does not really hold good. Zoroastrian refugees fleeing Muslim persecution in Iran were provided a home in Gujarat by a Hindu king, Jadi Rana. St. Thomas Christians were provided a home in Kerala. The first Jewish refugees settled over 2 millennia ago on the Malabar coast, and a second wave arrived pursuant to their expulsion from Iberia. When Buddhist monks were being butchered by the People's Liberation Army of China, India welcomed the Dalai Lama along with thousands of Buddhists. The country has accepted millions of refugees from Bangladesh during the 1971 genocide. The Baghdadi Jews and the Bene Israel from Pakistan were sheltered in India. So that spirit of refuge is intrinsic to India's dharmic values. Let me just end this particular segment on this particular thought I have, that what we are talking about is not just an issue of secularism, but the problem that people seem to have with the preservation of dharmic thought. And dharmic thought in itself is essentially plural. It embraces multiple truths. You can have, 33 million deities can be part of that same family. Jesus Christ can be incorporated on the facade of a Hindu temple. Buddha can be absorbed as the 9th avatar of Vishnu. You could be Astic, Gnostic, Shaivite, Vaishnavite, vegetarian, carnivore, omnivore, whatever you like. You can be a fire worshipper, idol worshipper, nature worshipper. You can worship Shiva, Shakti, or a combination of both. You may see the path to enlightenment. Tantra, Tantra, Mantra, and all of it is acceptable within the ethos of dharmic thought. And therefore, in that sense, if we can preserve dharmic ethos, then we have the best shot at being able to preserve our secularism, being able to preserve our pluralism, as it were.
Thanks very much, Ashwini Sanghi. That was very engrossing. Thanks as always. It's lovely speaking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Padmaja. Thank you.